change makers, and welcome to The Core, sponsored by Red Apple & This is your Everything Education podcast. We talk about current events, books to read. We interview education leaders, hear their stories, learn from their biggest lessons, and they share what they wish you knew about what it means to be in education today. I'm your host, Dr. Kia Turner. Buckle up for small seeds of inspiration that can lead to big changes in your classroom practice. Let's take a bite out of today's guest. This week, we are talking about what we need to do to create an inclusive classroom. And in fact, I'm calling this week's series Inclusion 101. All of the basics that you need to make your classroom an inclusive place for everyone. However, I am not the source of all knowledge, so all week I have experts coming in to talk to you about inclusion from the SPED perspective, inclusion culturally, including parents in your classroom, just how to make sure that you know everybody that is getting touched by the work you're doing in your classroom feels seen and safe there. So today we are doing part 2 of our conversation with Lisa Benson. For those of you who listened to the last episode yesterday, you know that Lisa is a former television news reporter who was galvanized really to jump into this world of diversity, equity, and inclusion by her own experience with being wrongfully terminated by her workplace. She turned around and successfully sued her former news station, went and educated herself about diversity, equity, and inclusion at Cornell. And now, after all of that, so she's kind of had a pivot, really. After all of that, serves as a trainer, speaker, now author. I hear you have a book coming out.
I do, and I'm so excited.
Okay, she has a book coming out later this year. You got to go ahead crushing 2019 goals, okay? We'll have to tell us where to get that, too. It's going to be on Amazon soon, right? We're putting it on Amazon.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, everybody's putting it on Amazon. But she has a book coming out, too. And she just is all over the place, spreading her message of we need to make sure that all voices are seen and safe, no matter the space. And I love that. Welcome back to the show, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Our last show, we talked about inclusion in terms of culture and race. So how to make a classroom culturally and racially inclusive. And that was pretty heavy. And then Lisa was jumping into this idea of gender inclusion. And that's why I was like, no, she's jumping into our next episode because I knew it was going to be such a meaty topic that we were going to need some more time on it. So I'm glad you could make the time for us today. I know you're running around a lot these days. So talk to us about it. Why is gender inclusion so important?
Well, back to what we were talking about earlier about belongingness. You want for all of the students in the classroom to feel as though they have a place there, that a place has been prepared for them. They should be there in that classroom. And so the reason the gender part resonates with me is because I grew up in a household of girls. And so I completely understand how girls roll in my mind. The Lord blessed me with boys. And so I have no idea what's going on with those kids. But what I'm noticing is definitely the energy space. I have no idea. If I could bottle it and sell it, I'd be a millionaire.
Amen.
But I see that that's also showing up in the classroom. I have 2 young boys. And so trying to corral that energy at home and then making the transfer to their teachers every day and wishing the best for them. And trying to be
like, y'all got it from here. I got to go.
Like, call me if you need me.
Yes.
But I can also see how in these spaces, how it is hard. This whole sit and get mentality when it comes to education is a challenge for some students. A lot of boys, but some girls too have a hard time with that same model. And so I think when you're talking about creating an inclusive classroom, I do think it's an important one to challenge gender stereotypes. You have to be willing to do something different because we grew up in a time where boys had a certain place, had expectations of them, and girls had a certain place in the room, and we had certain expectations of them. So I think as the educators, as the teachers, we have to buck our own mindset, buck our own biases. And so these children are able to grow and thrive in the classroom as they are, as who they are, and not based on who we want them to be.
I love that you said that, and I could not agree more. we do need to make sure that we're not thinking girls are going to sit and play quietly together, because all of us who spent time with a group of girls know that's not true. And we also need to not just say, well, boys are going to be rough and rowdy with each other, because all of us who spend time with a group of boys know that's not universally true either. So we do need to make sure that we aren't necessarily creating classrooms based around what we think our students are going to do because of the gender makeup of our class, okay? We know there's a whole phenomenon of girls not playing so nicely with one another, right? And boys who are thinking about doing more than building trucks, you know what I mean, or playing construction or cops and robbers or whatever. And so how are we responding to the reality of the children in our classrooms? Because people are embracing their difference. Thank goodness. It's about time. That means, like you said before, we need to address that in the classroom. So what's another tip you have? I heard the first one was we need to make sure we check our gender stereotypes. What's another?
One, we definitely need to avoid using gender-based nouns and pronouns. Instead, let's use friends, let's use scientists, let's use readers. Good. One, because when you talk about STEM, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. We have a lot of little girls who are intimidated as they get older in their middle school years because, again, the boys are seen as the mathematicians.
And
the girls
more encouraged to
exactly.
Do that
and
boys
so by taking
more encouraged to do that.
Absolutely. And so by taking these pronouns out, to me, it's not just about the gender and the self-identity. It's just so that all of you are able to be the scientists. Everyone in this space can be the writer. And the same thing is true about creative energies in boys. Somehow those are not as explored as they are in girls. So we can wipe the table clean, wipe the slate clean by addressing our students as the writers, as the scientists, as the mathematicians. We don't have to do the she, the him, and the hers. We can all allow them to be whoever they want to be. If we start that early on and get in the habit of doing that, that way they define who they are and what they want to be, not based on, again, our biases, based on our upbringing as far as what girls and boys should or should not be doing. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I also believe incorporating movement into learning. Because again, so often boys and girls are expected to sit and get and learn and read and be quiet. And I do think there has to be outlets for movement in the classroom. There has to be something, and maybe it is indoor activities or maybe it is outdoor activities, but I do think that needs to be incorporated, especially in the developmental years and the early education years. So
they need them completely all the way through.
I believe
all the way through.
Right. And so it's not looked at as a negative to want to move and embrace and consume space in your dwelling, to consume space in your world, because not to move back on the racial side, but so often Black and brown children are taught that they don't matter, that they should not consume the space they consume. But I think part of that is the movement, is the ability to move and to be who you are in this space, and that to be accepted. You still belong here. You still fit in this space, even if you have more energy than your counterparts.
Amen. I love that. And I love this idea of being aware of the pronouns we use. We know as adults, we get asked, what are your pronouns these days, right? I have several times, actually. What are your pronouns? Because we don't want to define people in a way that they aren't comfortable with, right? And it's the same with students. Like, growing up is such a fluid process. We need to allow them as much space and opportunity as they need to determine, this is who I am. This is how I'd like to be addressed. And I love this idea of saying, okay, all my friends, all my writers, I've heard teachers say scholars, just thinking about ways to address the group without using those pronouns. And it does make the classroom feel like we're all on equal footing. You're not just saying, all my boys are doing this and all my girls are doing that. You know what I mean? It almost makes me want to say, get rid of those boys and girls lines. You know what I mean? You see so common in elementary school, all my boys line up over here and all my girls line up over here. Maybe it could be everybody with a red shirt, get over here. Everybody with khaki pants, get over here. And in that way, we could stop putting the focus on our gender. And I also love this idea of saying kids need to move around, and that's okay. So stop thinking we just need to make sure we keep an eye on the boys, and instead think all of these kids may need a brain break. And I'm seeing a lot of that in elementary, but still not so much at the secondary level. We just assume everybody wants to sit silently for 8 hours at a stretch, not saying nothing. Adults cannot do that. We believe children should do that. And when they don't, we automatically think, oh, those rowdy boys. Oh, those chatty girls. You know what I mean?
Right,
but that's not the case. As people, they need a minute. I mean, we all do.
I agree. And I think trying to bake movement into your academic day, it has to be a deliberate move, but it can be. I mean, it could be about moving items from one side of the room to the other side of the room. And what you were talking about as far as the social grouping, as far as the girls on this side, the boys on this side, there could be boys or girls in one space that have friends who are the boys who want to stand next to. So I agree. If you decide to do the social grouping based on everyone with red shirts on or the rainbow colors stand over here, one, it forces other socialization. Maybe a little girl who would not have talked to a boy in a blue shirt, all of a sudden they're standing next to each other. And so I just think we as the educators are willing to challenge gender roles, then that will give our students and our children the opportunity to simply grow into their authentic people, into their authentic selves, and be okay with that. Because what happens in these spaces is these kids ultimately feel as though they don't belong in this space. And that absolutely dictates the outcomes when it comes to students, and especially students who show up in marginalized communities and spaces.
I love that. So hit us with your top 3 lists before we go.
So the top 3 would be 1, challenge gender stereotypes, avoid using gender-based nouns and pronouns, incorporate movement in learning, because again, so often the sit and get does not work for all students across the board, and allow mixed grouping and no boy or girl lineups so that boys and girls can interact, not based on their gender or sexuality, but based on the fact that they are all here in a common space, wanting to learn, wanting to grow, and want to be a part of this classroom community.
I love that. You guys, like I said last time that Lisa sat down with us, she is phenomenal. She talks to parent groups. So for those of you who are listening who may be in charge of like PTA or your school team meeting and you're like, we need to have this conversation, you can definitely reach out to Lisa for that. She also does school training. So let's say that you're an admin or you think that your admin needs to get a hold of Lisa so that your teachers can think through how to make your school spaces more inclusive. She does that. And then she also does one-to-one coaching. If you are a person who's like, hey, I just need help with doing this in the space that I am, you can reach out to Lisa for one-to-one coaching. She has her book dropping later this year. Keep your eye out for that. And you can keep up with Lisa at www.lisabenson.org. .org, yeah. Hi, lisabenson.org. You need to catch her while you can. She is in and out of KC frequently, so she does travel. Make sure you reach out. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, honey. 2 conversations in. We'll have to have you back when we do Inclusion 102 because y'all know it's coming. Okay, I've had such good feedback, so stay tuned and we'll see if we can get Lisa back for that. You guys, don't forget to help me get my Instagram count up. Go ahead and follow on Instagram. It's at firedup_teaching. And on Twitter, it's at firedup_teacher. That is all I have for today. Go forth, fire starters. Be great and stay lit. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to The Core. Wherever you are listening to us, be sure to like our show, subscribe, and share the episode that's meant the most to you. We appreciate every single one of our subscribers, as do our sponsors. We look forward to seeing you next week. You can also check us out on YouTube at Red Apple Edco if you'd like to see more video of these conversations. We have them posted there.